How are we sort of bringing an umbrella or putting on sunscreen or having the right clothing for the climate in our internal world? Because a lot of times, it's a test of your mettle, right? Anyone can be up or feel like it's all sunshine and rainbows when it is sunny out. I'm excited for you to see this week's episode, but before we get to that, I have a message for you. If you're a parent of an elite athlete or a coach of a high-performing team and you're looking for some help or assistance with making them more mentally resilient, perform with more confidence, be more consistent, anything like that, then this is for you. I have an 8-week program all designed to address exactly that, to help your athlete be at their best on a more consistent basis and not get tripped up by those little voices in their head and getting down on themselves for mistakes, but performing like we know they can. So what I want you to do is don't delay, just grab a time on my calendar through this link and let's set up a time to talk about your specific situation and how what I'm offering in my 8-week program can help. Okay. So it's bryndrescher.com/free consultation. So click this link, grab a time on my calendar. I look forward to talking to you. And now on to this week's episode. Welcome back to another episode of the Mental Advantage Podcast. Time for another solo episode with Coach Bryn. And what are we talking about today? We are talking about the weather. Yes, the weather. So, you know how everywhere you go, people ask you, what's the weather? What's the weather like in your city, in your town, in your area, right? And of course, as usual, I'm not just talking about the outside weather, but your inside weather, right? So yes, of course, there is people that you ask, what's the weather like where you are? And they'll say, it's raining, it's terrible, it's gloomy outside, it's dark, right? And here's the thing. There's no such thing as good or bad weather. There's just weather, right? But a lot of people have their own ways of looking at things. And based on, the whole thing, is the glass half full, is the glass half empty, right? Is it nice outside? Is it not so nice outside? That's all up to the person, right? Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? The most important thing we have to understand is that for everyone that's really upset that their shoes are getting wet, there's somebody doing a rain dance because they have crops. They have some reason they wanted it to rain. And there's actually some people that just like to dance in the rain. So I want us to think about that when it comes to sports, when it comes to life, right, on a day-to-day, what's your weather like? What's the weather like where you are? And how can you make every day a good day as far as your weather, your internal weather system, right? Because a lot of times, people look at an entire day and they will say, man, today's going to be a terrible day because I woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Something went wrong initially and it's just a bad day. When it's really just can be a bad moment. And so I want us to think about what's our weather like where we are? How are we sort of bringing an umbrella or putting on sunscreen or having the right clothing for the climate in our internal world? Because a lot of times, it's a test of your mettle, right? Anyone can be up or feel like it's all sunshine and rainbows when it is sunny outside. Most people actually can be in a good mood when the sky is blue and the sun is shining. But when it isn't, there's people that, we're like these ships, which have when the waters are calm, we're doing well, we're sunbathing on the deck of the boat. But then all of a sudden, right, the clouds change, the wind kicks up, the waves start going and tossing the boat to and fro, and then we're panicking, right? So the key is, how can you control your inner weather regardless of the outer weather? Okay, regardless of the outer weather, how can you make sure that if you're a person who happens to like rain and clouds, that it's always rainy and cloudy, right? Regardless of the outside weather, if it's sunshiny, whatever, and vice versa, right? Because most people actually do, statistically, more people do like the sun and the clear days and the light breezes and things like that, right? But it's important that we understand that our inner weather should always be calm, neutral, easy, and flow as best as we can, right? Doesn't mean there isn't going to be moments of turbulence, right? Sort of like a flight, sometimes the flight's going to go up and down, but it's still going to stay in the air, right? But sometimes we are allowing ourselves to be tossed to and fro like the boat instead of being that strong, sort of like strong force in the calm in the eye of the storm, so to speak, right? So things are going to go wrong in a game, in your competitions, in your practices, with your teammates, with your coaches. But how can you control that inner weather? What are you doing to make sure that regardless of the outside conditions, that you are appropriately attired and equipped to handle just about anything, because you've got a strong inner system that's kind of preparing you for any inclement weather, no matter what, because you're always seeing it as to your advantage, for you, all of that. So I really, I don't want to belabor the point, but how do you do this, right? How do you do this? Because a lot of people say, well, yeah, that's easy for you to say, but you haven't been through insert difficult situation, challenge here. Well, I have actually. I've been through a lot of difficult things, right? And the key is, how can I neutralize it and make sure that I'm taking control of my inner weather, right? Externally, it could seem like the sky is falling, right? Like Chicken Little, the sky is falling, or things are falling apart, or things don't look like the way that I want them to for my business, for my relationship, for my whatever, right? My sport, my whatever it is. And I want you to think about that and say, okay, but let's think about a time. I want you to think about a time that was the case, right? And this is a hindsight situation. And then it actually all worked out. Like all this hype and terribleness that you went through actually turned out to be all for naught, because within a day or two, it had all resolved itself. And you had a terrible journey to a destination that you were going to get to regardless, because you decided to, kind of like allow yourself to be subject to the weather instead of being your own weatherman and forecasting something good. So I want you to work on, how can you be the calm in the storm? How can you be that person that is constantly seeing and putting yourself in the perspective of, hey, this too shall pass. Everything's going to work out for me. Everything's working together for my good. And I've seen that in my past as well. And I've suffered many a storm that turned out to be just a rain cloud that was passing by, right? Because a lot of times we will make it into an entire tsunami when it's really just a sprinkle. And so we want to learn how to control our inner weather. So the first thing we need to do is we need to start to, tell ourselves a better story. Something like I already said, everything's always working out for me. Everything's coming together for my good. What happens to me happens for me. Like those type of sayings, thoughts, and ways of looking at things can really help you get through a lot. Secondly, what can I learn here? Always looking for an opportunity to learn from the situation. What's the lesson in this difficulty, this challenge, this period? Because it always turns out to just be a moment, a blip, some sort of temporary phase, right? So we can go through that. And then ultimately at the end, it's just like, you know what? I'm not going to let anything, sacrifice my peace. My peace is worth more to me than that. So my inner weather is always, in my case would be sunny, breezy, and just a beautiful day to be outside and enjoy the weather, right? That's what I want to keep my inner in as much as possible. And so it's not to say that we don't have partly cloudy days. It's not to say that even sometimes there's overcast. But in general, my general way of being is that everything's always pretty good in there, right? Regardless of what's happening in the world. While everyone else is yelling with their heads are cut off, and they're just freaking out, I'm staying pretty calm because I am always looking on that other side, or keeping things neutral and deciding better to how can I respond to this. So I want you to become a better responder to things, and just how am I going to control my inner weather? What's the forecast where I am, regardless of what the weatherman, the world, TV, your friends, your family, your loved ones might be telling you, or people around you? What's your weather like? Okay. So kind of like, what's in your wallet? what's your weather like, right? I want you to think about your inner weather and how can you be that force and source of good for those around you, but not to the point that it's exhausting and you're trying to hold it up for everybody else, but that it's just such a way of being that you're known for that. You're known for that calm. You're known for that good. And it's just there regardless. So that is today's episode of the Mental Advantage podcast. I want you to work on controlling your inner weather. And this is going to help you respond better on the court, on the field, on the ice, all of that in the arena. You're going to have better outcomes because you're learning how to control your inner weather regardless of the outer weather, right? And that is going to be invaluable to you when everyone else is panicking. You're going to know what to do. You're going to know how to better respond and get better results. So that has been this week's episode. Please leave a comment below what your favorite part was. Make sure you share, like, comment, and subscribe to this episode, and we'll see you next week.